Thank you, everyone, for joining us again for our ADHD Awareness Month series in October. We have been talking about a variety of topics over the course of the month, and we have, I guess, Kimaleen here today, and we are going to be talking about all things just being multi-passionate and like the pros and cons of all of that, and just, just being interested in a lot of things with ADHD and recognizing that we have creative brains that can take us in multiple different directions. That may not make sense to other people, but they make sense to us.
Yes.
And so I am going to have Kimaleen introduce herself, if that is okay. And I'm going
Yeah.
to put the topic of conversation while you're talking in the chat so people are aware when they come on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Megan. First of
Uh-huh.
all, thank you for having me. So my name is Kimaleen. I am first generation Vietnamese American, and I've been diagnosed with ADHD later in my adulthood, and just have been navigating my life as a multi-passionate, a multi-hyphenate, and it has been a journey so far. But I'm happy to be on here and to have a discussion on what it's like to navigate having ADHD and being a multi-passionate.
Yes, and let me tell you a little bit why I have invited her to join us. One, because she's just brilliant and she's just
Thank
amazing, and
you, Megan.
she's just multi-talented, right? And so, and I think that should be honored and that should be celebrated. And so I'm here to do that for her and for other people to recognize that, for themselves to be able to do a kind of that introspective look and realize and accept the fact that they are multi-talented and that they do have a lot of interests, and that's okay, and to kind of normalize that. And so we're going to be listening to Kimaleen's story and her brilliance and all the things that she is
Thank you,
doing
Megan. You're too kind. You're saying all these things.
and how everything is connected. And I may share some things as well because I have a lot of interest as well, and so it is what it is.
Yes.
We have ADHD. So tell us all the things that you're doing.
Well, to start, I met you, Megan, at Podcast Movement, which was in
Hmm.
August, I believe, and I think it was just meant to be. You were just standing there with your baby, and I'm like, hey, like, what's up? Let's talk. And that's how we really got to connect. And it turns out, I found out that you're an ADHD coach and therapist as well, and so I think it kind of just aligned where we can further chat, and that's how I'm here.
Yeah.
I will say I think that I've lived many lives. So I started off my professional career in technical recruiting, and then I moved into hospitality, travel, and tourism, which has been a passion of mine for as long as I've known. But since being in that field for 6 years or longer, and in real estate as well, I just didn't feel like it aligned anymore. I
Hmm.
really wanted to use my voice as well as to help others, right? To amplify underrepresented voices in the community and beyond. So, what does that even look like? Well, it's a multitude of things. So, I actually left the hospitality, travel, and tourism industry to move into the social impact industry, which is what I'm really passionate about. And now I'm a consultant working with nonprofits in the social impact space, helping others step into the best versions of themselves, specifically marginalized communities. So growing up, I didn't really feel like I had a voice. And so my why has been to amplify diverse and underrepresented voices in the community, to tell stories. So I am a storyteller, a consultant in the social impact space, as well as a creative social entrepreneur. So there's the social entrepreneur part, of course, because I've, co-founded a nonprofit. I've been in the nonprofit space for so long as a passion, but then I'm also a creative at heart. And so I'm kind of meshing it all together. I'm also a mental health advocate,
Hmm.
really, advocating for our communities and advocating for our mental health is so important. And I would say that being that I'm first generation Vietnamese American, there isn't always that language to even talk about mental health. So I really care
Yeah.
about destigmatizing mental health in our communities. And I'm sure we can have a lot to relate with that as well.
Yeah. And just note the people that are watching, she's coming back to be talking about first generation and mental health with with a psychologist. So make note of that. Follow me, and then so that you can know when that conversation is going to be happening. So I heard you talk about being a consultant. I heard you talking about being an advocate and a creative. Did I make that up?
Creative,
Yes,
yes.
a creative. I mean, I met you at the podcast movement thing,
Which
right?
makes
So
sense.
about a podcast. Do you have a podcast?
I don't have a podcast.
Okay.
I've
Yeah.
thought about it, but I'm moving in a different direction where I'm creating, really utilizing my own voice,
Okay.
my own platform, to amplify voices. And so
Okay.
more to come with that.
Okay. So we're amplifying voices in multiple ways. So it seems like there's a thread in between all of the things that you're doing right now. But I feel like I went on your page and you had some photography in here. You were in
I
some
also
like
model.
fancy
Yeah, I
dresses.
forgot to
Yes.
mention that part. There's so much that I do, but really it's at the heart of, it's at the intersections of wellness,
Mm-hmm.
advocacy, culture, and representation. So when I do these photo shoots, I do things that align with me. I don't just do things to do something, right?
Right.
Something that a friend that had said to me recently, Sadia, shout out to Sadia. She is also an entrepreneur, and I work with her in the area that I live. And she tells me that, she lost my train of thought of where I was going there. I was talking about modeling. Well, anyways, model to more so creatively express myself and to tell my
Mm-hmm.
story. So it's visual storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I totally forgot what I was going to say before that, but yeah.
No, it's okay. If it comes back to you, it will come back. Like,
Yeah.
you get it. And what I really am hearing from you in this particular conversation is that it's the core of what you're doing is all of the same, and it's being represented in multiple different ways.
Exactly.
And so, that could look like modeling, that could look like using your own voice in platforms like this. That could be writing, speaking, writing. And so, the key thing, just a takeaway for those that are listening and that you feel like you're multi-passionate, like really when you take a look at the things that you're doing, is there really a core interest? And that is now just being reflected in different things. But what's interesting about that is that from the outside, like it makes sense. Like for me, that makes sense, right? But from the outside perspective, it can look like you're all over the place and that you don't have one brand, or like that you don't have one focus. And I think that sometimes can be that language that the world uses around like you just need to do one thing or just stick with one thing can be really detrimental for somebody or people like us that do have multiple interests, but there really is a connection between the things that cannot necessarily be seen externally, but we feel it internally.
Yeah, you could not have said it better. I really think that everything we do is all interconnected. It just came back to me, the thought that I was going to say back to my friend Sadia, and shout out to her, is something she said to me recently that really stood out is posting, not necessarily for attention. It's never been that for me, but for the intentionality of it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
me posting these photo shoots when I feel aligned and I have the mental capacity to do so, it's the intention behind it, right? But it's also at the intersections, and it's all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I do is very much interconnected. I love connecting with others, but if I could also help others utilize the resources that I have and that I know to provide resources for communities in need,
Mm-hmm.
that is a huge passion of mine as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I would argue that if you are an ADHDer, that can come across to other people as doing a lot of different things and feeling like you're all over the place, like really step back and ask yourself, what is the thing that connects all of them, or what is the intention behind what it is that you're doing, and speak to that. So, because you will be, the reality is like going to be questioned because everybody has an opinion about everything, right? Especially in the social media age.
It can be very overstimulating.
Yes, it can definitely be very overstimulating. But I would say to those people that are like trying to figure out and better understand like what your brand is, right? Like thinking about all of the different areas that you are passionate about, understand the core of it, and that is really your branding.
Exactly. And it's like not trying to be anyone else but yourself. And I always tell people that as well. And it does, I mean, I feel like I've done a lot of work to get to where I am today, and a lot of inner work, still doing a lot of work, and I am a work in progress, but really just following your why and also just staying true to yourself, no matter what people think, right? And sometimes it can, for me at least, it can feel really hard because it's almost like we talk a lot about this in mental health. You can feel, I'm not hearing actual voices, but the voices that I've heard growing up, like, oh, I'm only I'm a certain way, right? And especially because culturally and how I grew up, it's not really talked about ADHD and mental health in
Mm-hmm.
general. It's not a discussion. And so I felt like I was labeled and judged growing up. But with that being said, we're so much more than all of that. Like we're so much more than our diagnosis, than our ADHD, than our mental health. And I think that's why I do what I do. I want to be able to just step into that and operate in that capacity, but also feel like I belong. And because we all do belong, we all have something special to offer. I truly believe that. Um, and and yeah.
I'm writing down a question as you're talking.
Okay, sounds
A
good.
couple questions came up for me while you were talking. So one is, you said that you did a lot of inner work. What does that inner work look like for you?
Well, it's
Or what did it look like?
slowing
Or
down. Yeah, it's slowing down because first of all, I operate like 100 miles per hour. Like my thought never, or my brain never shuts off, even when I sleep. And so really learning how to regulate my nervous system and
hmm
slowing down. And so what that looks like, and it looks differently for everyone, right? And for me, it looks like Pilates and meditation. So when I was in Colorado, I really fell in love with Legree actually, which is a high intensity, low impact workout. It's
Oh, okay.
45 minutes, you get a full body workout in, and that for me was really helpful for me because I'm like, wow, I finally found a workout that I enjoy. And so when it comes to regulating your nervous system is doing things that you enjoy, one, right? But also not always making healing your whole entire personality because then it's also really exhausting. So having a balance
Mm-hmm.
with it all, and just really just existing and being present. I think that's the biggest thing is that being present in the moment because I could literally have all these thoughts about how do I have like, what does my self-care routine look like? And then I start spiraling and I'm like, and then I don't even do it, right? And so just being present, listening to your body and listening to yourself and your intuition. I think that's so important. And so I also have stopped doing things that no longer align with me. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is, I left a corporate job that was no longer aligning. I just felt really burnt out. And yeah, I left that and I just came home to myself. I think that's been the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing. And I've been doing things that I will also say it is a privilege to be able to do these things. And I feel very fortunate to be able to take this time off to heal and to do this inner work. But I would want to acknowledge and recognize that privilege that does come with that because
Yeah.
not everyone can do that. Like I'm not a mom and I have like a lot of kids to take care of. And kudos to you, Megan, because I know that you are balancing a multitude of things as a businesswoman and entrepreneur.
Oh yeah. I mean, we didn't even talk about all the things that I'm
Yeah.
balancing right now,
Yeah,
right?
no, would love to hear more about that.
I could talk about that if people are interested, but let me tell you, definitely. So I too fall into that multi-interest, multi-passionate um, category, right? And so, but then also there's things that have to get done, and so there's and that's the parenting and like. I'm in this sandwich generation too, where you're taking care of kids and you're taking care of elders, and so there's the have to things, and so I don't know if it's necessarily a passion, but it's life. And so
Yeah.
and so there's the life projects that have to happen and the passion projects that happen and then all of the new ideas that come that you try to those thoughts like you just have to kind of control, right? And so like for instance, like obviously there's ADHD at work in this business that I'm
Yeah.
doing, and also just FYI people, there is a group coaching membership coming out soon, so stay tuned to hearing more information about that. That's like my mini little commercial. Um, and so there's that. Then I'm doing group coaching. Also, there's a group coaching session for women with ADHD happening on Thursday at 8 o'clock. So join that as
Ooh,
well. And if you need the information about that, it's in my bio. But besides all of the things that are happening with ADHD at work, like I still am like really I'm a creative too, right? And so like I need to have that creative outlet like you had explained earlier. So I sometimes like will take on little side projects for like for instance like my cousin is getting married and she's they have weddings is like a whole thing. And so I helped create some gifts for her that she's going to be giving her bridal party that's going to be going on like, the pre-bridal vacation thing. And so taking the time to like break up my Cricut and like my heat press, and like I love all that stuff, and
Yes.
to be able to spend some time just being creative in that way energizes me. Um, and so there's that. Like I like to make earrings. Like my whole house, when I tell you it's a arts and crafts
I love
space,
that.
it is an arts and crafts space. Like if you want it made, I can probably figure out how to make it, right? And like I have tools, I have all the things, candles, like it's all these random things that I just really do enjoy doing. In addition to ensuring that individuals with ADHD are supported, and that we're working and living in an environment that supports us, and we're working and living in an environment where we can put some strategies in place in order to ensure that we're operating and thriving as well, because the world isn't designed for us, and so there are adjustments that we need to make, but the world also needs to adjust too. And so I am really passionate in making sure that everybody is successful in that space. So yeah, so
Here
being
for it.
multi-passionate and ADHD just kind of go together, right? But there was something else that you had said that I wanted to ask you about, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So you had
Ask
just talked
away.
about being labeled and being judged, and I'm questioning, like my question is, do you feel like that labeling and that sense of judgment delayed or inhibited like your ability to start different passions or move forward with something that you were passionate about, or even recognizing that you were passionate about something?
Oh, yes, 100%. I feel like and not to necessarily even blame, I'm very fortunate to have like the parents that I've had growing up. They've done, I mean, they're refugees after the Vietnam War. So it was not, and they're also entrepreneurs themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
to grow up in an environment where I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment, right? But not knowing that I had ADHD, not having the resources, feeling so behind traditionally in school. And I always felt like there was something wrong with me. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why is everyone else performing and I'm not? Like, is there something wrong with me? But then I realized when I started understanding myself, when I started advocating for myself, which is something that I really recommend, and something that I learned during the workforce and like the professional workforce, is that culturally, I didn't learn how to advocate for myself. And so when you learn how to advocate for yourself, that's when you start seeing all these patterns. And I'm like, oh, this is what I need to thrive. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. And so I realized, wow, like when I started learning the needs that I need, like the accommodations and the needs that I needed, I expressed that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I advocate for myself. I'm doing research and speaking with professionals and people in the wellness space and doctors and psychiatrists and social, like doing that own inner work has really helped, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
think that definitely not knowing, not even having the language. Well, one, I'm bilingual, so I speak Vietnamese as well. And I think
Mm-hmm.
my brain just it's like operates in like multitude of ways. And so trying to explain growing up to my parents, there were no words for that. There was no language for that growing up. And even now, I think I'm just focused on myself
Mm-hmm.
and healing so that I think when you fully just do what's best for you. And something that my sister said, who is now a nurse, shout out to her as well. She's always like helped me advocate for myself as well, even when we didn't know how to advocate for each other or what ourselves, right? And so growing up in that environment, it was extremely difficult. And I think on the outside, it could feel like, well, maybe I have everything together, but I don't. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
I just come off very positive because I am a positive person. And I will say that's a strength of mine, but that does not mean that I haven't been through a lot of difficulties growing up, not knowing how to speak up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that impacted everything. It shaped my relationships. It shaped my communication. Not knowing how to basically just set boundaries. I think that's a huge one. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I started learning all of this about myself and about how I can help others, I'm like, okay, well, setting boundaries, having that balance, and advocating for yourself is also very important because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you can't help anyone unless you help yourself first. That is like, it's like the saying that goes, it's like healers heal others or free people, and like hurt
Yeah.
people. It's along the
Mm-hmm.
lines of that. And so, yeah, I think thinking back, it's been a very emotional journey. Thinking back, I definitely think that I needed help and the resources, and I just didn't know how to access that. And I think that's what has catapulted me to where I am today, wanting to use my resources and learn everything to help others.
I love that. And, the concept of advocacy is such an important concept to have a conversation about. And it's also a skill that is so necessary in life, right? And so, also, but the thing about advocacy too is that you're recognizing that, especially when you have multiple different identifiers, right? And so, you find yourself, if you identify as a woman, like you find yourself advocating in spaces on behalf of just being a woman. You advocate for yourself on just being first generation Vietnamese or being a Black woman or, and like any of your other identifiers, right? And so, and sometimes when you have a new identifier like ADHD, it's kind of thinking about how have you utilized advocacy skills in your other identifiers and then apply that skill set to your new identifier, if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Somebody asked us a question. How do you both say ADHD influences your emotional regulation or reactions? You want me to answer that question? You
can go first and I'll go after you. Yeah. I don't think about it for a second.
No problem. So, I would argue that some of the core challenges with ADHD is regulating your emotions. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And so ADHD does influence your ability to regulate your emotions. And there's some science behind that we're not going to thoroughly get into in this particular conversation because that's not the topic today. However, if you want some more information about that, just send me a DM and I will get you that information. And then also reactions, that can also be related to some executive functions around impulsivity. And so if you're have a weaker executive function around impulsivity and you're emotionally charged, your reaction to something can come quickly. So for example, like my mom's physical therapist, I didn't exactly like what she had to say yesterday. So there was a reaction. Yes. And then there was a reaction that involved with me saying, you know what, I'm done with this conversation and hanging up on the person. Was that the most appropriate response? No. Probably not. Did it make me feel better? It absolutely did. And so I'm okay with that, if I'm being honest. And so, yes, the ADHD, and it's not an excuse, but it definitely is an explanation. I felt it inside. Like I felt my anger and I felt it in my core. And I said, I cannot do this anymore. Click. And it definitely doesn't have the same feeling as it does like back in the day when you actually used to hang up a phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, ADHD definitely, it's when you're emotionally dysregulated and it impacts your ability to what you're going to do next also.
I will say that too.
And so when you are experiencing some emotional dysregulation, like you need to get regulated first before you can start your next task. That's my answer to that question. If you feel like you want to add to it, you can. If you feel like you don't, that's fine too.
I very much resonated with everything you said, Megan. I think that, so I was known to have anger issues growing up. I was super angry, and I think my dad at one point wanted to put me into anger management classes because we didn't know, and it makes me kind of emotional and sad because it's like we didn't know that like it was so much deeper than that, right? But I think, yes, it plays a huge part in emotional, I think the word used was dysregulation, something along the lines of that.
Yep.
And I think that there were times where, when I'm super, it's like when you're, something that my dad has also told me that has really helped unknowingly is that don't get too high on your highs and don't get too low on your lows. And I'm like, I just took that. I'm like, wow, that has really helped me because I also didn't know that the reason why I may have, executive dysfunction and emotional dysregulation is because I didn't have the resources to know how to manage my emotions. So growing up, I used to get really angry, right? And I'm like, well, I didn't know how to calm down from that. And it has to do with not knowing how to regulate our emotions. And so now, because we are so self-aware, I just take a step back. I'm like, then, just try not to respond. Don't respond by reacting, right? And so that has been something that's been really helping me. And I think something else that I've been very interested in is also exploring becoming a meditation or yoga instructor. It's been on mine for a while now. So that's all something that I've been working on, because I do feel like, and I also grew up Buddhist, and that ties in along with like the whole spirituality and
Yep.
being Buddhist and having to meditate. And I know that that is something that is not necessarily always taught, you know, even I think that it should be taught as a skill for youth, actually. And a lot of underrepresented youth don't have that.
100% agree. Somebody had asked us, like, I think you're answering this question, but like, just to say it out loud, how do you regulate before a task? Please give us your tried and true strategies. But Camille, what I heard you say was meditation, stopping, pausing, are some of the strategies that you have used to help regulate your emotions.
Yeah, and not responding right away. And because at that point I'm just reacting. I'm just emotionally reacting and I'm not really thinking things through. And so
Mm-hmm.
nowadays I try to just take a step back, because I am very much self-aware now. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's how I would go about it. I will also say, so I personally I thought things in a very holistic way. I don't personally like to rely on medication. And so I know even when I was first diagnosed for ADHD, temporarily to help, I was diagnosed with like, I had like prescriptions for medication that had helped me, right? But long term wise, I think taking vitamins, and one vitamin I'll say that has really helped, that my mental health nurse practitioner has suggested for me, is magnesium. So I don't know if you talk a lot about magnesium, but magnesium and L-theanine, my sister also tells me this, who's the nurse, she also tells me this a lot too, but magnesium and L-theanine has really helped me in terms of, I think, really just helping with brain health and slowing me down. I can't speak on all of the medical, I
Yeah,
can't speak like that
but
right
we
now,
do
but
have I do have a nutritionist coming in on Friday, and so that can be a
oh,
question. So if people are
that's
interested in
awesome.
learning about all things nutrition and ADHD, so we can I'll make a note of
That's
to talk to her about
amazing.
magnesium during the conversation on Friday. So definitely tune into
Yes,
that, everybody.
we'll be
Um,
there.
yeah, so some of the strategies that have worked for me and those that I have taught some other of my clients as well. So I'm actually thinking about coming on tomorrow to talk about this in more detail, but there's definitely doing some deep breathing, some breathing work, doing some bilateral stimulation, doing taking a walk, going outside, getting in nature, doing the things that increase your dopamine to kind of get you out of that high anxious space. Um, and so using my example from yesterday, I was dysregulated after I hung up the conversation, and I knew that. And so part of it was I had to recognize and be aware of my own dysregulation. So that was step one, honestly. And knowing how, and like what the trigger for me is, like when I'm feeling a certain way, when my body temperature has risen, like I know that I'm dysregulated, and I accept the fact that I'm dysregulated now. So now I need to access a series of tools in order to get regulated, because I have tasks that I need to get done. Like I can't not get things done, especially when I have a 1 year old at home. So like I still have to take care of him, right?
Of course.
And so I can't lean on, like I'm not, it's just not just me anymore. And so I'm responsible for another human being. And so that external like pressure kind of snaps me out of it a little bit, knowing that I have that additional responsibility. That or having a positive conversation with somebody about something else, getting it out, like venting. Like I needed to vent. I needed to tell somebody my story because I didn't want to be the only one to feel like I was crazy for being so upset. I needed the
Yes.
validation. And so recognizing that I needed to be validated, I needed to get outside and get some fresh air. I am recognizing that I am dysregulated and that I have to do something about it, because being dysregulated is not going to work for. It wasn't going to work for me for the rest of the day. And so I'm like, okay, well, you got to do something. You got to figure it out. Whether or not it's like, and for me, it's probably not necessarily a good habit. I don't necessarily recommend this because this can lead to other things, but I did eat a cookie.
Yes.
Um, also. And so, again, we're having a conversation about nutrition, and that may not have necessarily been the right food choice.
And that's
Um,
okay.
and that's okay. But it is what it is. But I also know that I got outside and got some fresh air, hugged my child, like doing things that help me cool down so that I can now remember, like, okay, these are the things that I got to do for the rest of the day. So I hope that answers your question. Dr. Shauna coming in here asking me all these hard questions.
Thank you, Dr. Shauna, for asking these questions too.
What do you, oh wait, another question. What do you like most about your superpower?
I love that question. Um, well, I feel like it's the fact that I am multi-passionate and multi-hyphenated.
Mm-hmm.
That is a strength and power in itself. And I will say being very creative. I do think that the thoughts are endless. Give me all the
Mm-hmm.
ideas. I also feel like being able to always find different solutions to things. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a huge strength that comes with it. Being able to solve problems and being versatile and being adaptable, flexible, all the different things,
Mm-hmm.
being very diverse at the core of
Mm-hmm.
all the different interests you have. And I also think that being relatable and helping others in terms of connecting, being able to see patterns in different people and certain situations and having that empathetic perspective to
Mm-hmm.
really see things at different perspectives as well. I think that's a huge, those are multiple strengths, I would say, or superpowers.
Yeah. Um, I love that. And something that you just said reminded me actually of a conversation that we had the other day with Kyla, and you know, she recognized that too. Like she was able, like that level of creativity and being able to see solutions to problems that, and to see the problems actually, to see the problems and to see the solutions for the
Yes.
problems that other people weren't seeing.
Yes.
And so, you know, she was able to turn that into a business. And so, you know,
What?
as a consultant, she's like, here's an idea. And if you need
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't like, here's a plan to like help you execute this. I'm not going to execute this because like I don't have time for that. And executing it may not necessarily be a skill, but if you need somebody to see the problem and to see the solution, then like that's the skill set, and that's a skill that people need because there's a bunch of people that don't see the problems.
I would love to
And
connect with her. Very much so as a
yes.
consultant.
Yes, and so she turned that into a business,
That's
and
amazing.
that's it's recognizing your strengths and so what you can and how you can add value to people, right, into businesses. Um, the other thing, what I was going to say, um, that's all that I got for you. Actually, let me scroll through the rest of the comments. Um, Someone had also indicated like the difference between being multi-passionate and indecisive, which
Ooh.
actually is connected to a question that I was going to ask you around how do you know when to quit something that you're passionate about versus just feeling like you're quitting or like giving up. Is that so? It's all kind of connected, like
Yeah.
being multi-passionate versus being indecisive.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing this up. It's actually something that I also wanted to share. So one of the, I think, hard sides of being multi-passionate and also having ADHD is it can feel very, at times, overwhelming, not knowing which path to pursue and knowing you can't do it all as well, right? But something that a friend that had said to me recently, um, she is in the space of mental health as well. She told me that following the loudest thing, like go after what is the loudest. And that really helped me because at times I'll be like, well, I have so many things I want to pursue. And so thinking about my own purpose and my why and following what is the loudest in the current moment, I don't think that you can go wrong in that at all because you're doing what's aligned with you.
Mm-hmm.
But also being mindful of your ADHD. And when you want to do a certain task, for example, I would think to myself, is this something that I really want to do or is it my ADHD speaking? Because it probably
Mm-hmm.
is both. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I probably want to do it and it's also my ADHD. And so being able to be very self-aware and again, slow down and think, is this something that I actually want to do long-term wise? Because it
Mm-hmm.
also, I've been creating a career and a life that is very sustainable for myself because I care about my health, but also my family. I want to be there for my family. And I can't do that unless I create a career that's sustainable for myself. And so really ask yourself, is this something that I want to do at the very moment? Because it might just be your ADHD speaking as well. And being able to sit down with that.
Yeah, and I would also say like having a really honest, kind of piggybacking off what you said, but just having a really honest conversation with yourself around your capacity. So your capacity and your why, and that why could be anything from, I have responsibilities. Like I have real responsibilities. I have real bills. Like I have
Yes,
real things that need
absolutely.
to be taken care of. And that may be okay for the reason why you're doing something right now. But if you have a new idea and it's, does it fall being in the indecisive category? Maybe, or it's just you haven't decided when you're
Yes.
going to do it. And so you don't always have to say no forever to something, but it's like no for right now. And so this is something that I can get to later, or I can put a time, like, planning and prioritization can be hard, right, for us ADHDers. But this is your opportunity to kind of stop, reflect on what are those different things that you do have going on and that you are interested in, and create some type of timeline for it. So sometimes I feel like oh, well, I feel like you get this new idea, you got to do it right now, right? That's in the, of course, like
My
that's
life,
the
yes.
impulsiveness. And that's like the impulsiveness of like
Yes.
what comes along with ADHD. But that's when you have to stop and pause and then ask yourself some series of questions like, yes, this is a great idea. However, do I have the resources? Like, do I have the money for this? Do I have the time for this? Do I have the relationships that I need to build for this? Do I have access to all of the things that are required in order to execute this new idea? If the answer to that question is no, then don't do it right now. But it doesn't mean you have to say no forever. Or can you be like Kyla and just say, you know what, this is a really good idea. I don't need to do this at all. However, I can try somebody and give them this idea, and then they can execute it because this would also help them.
Yes.
And so it's like it's doing something with that brilliance, right? And I would argue that those ideas and the ADHD brain is brilliant in that capacity. Like we have the ability to come up with these different solutions and different ideas, but it doesn't have to be something that we do today or at all. And so, but yeah, so just keep that in mind. I do think that it will be viewed as being indecisive from the external perspective, and and that can have all different types of negative connotations
That's
along
what I
with
mean
it.
by where that, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt again
No, it's
before I
okay.
forget my thoughts.
No, go ahead.
That's what I mean earlier when I was saying being judged. Maybe you can relate growing up, but like feeling judged because you're labeled as a certain way. It's like you're lazy, you're indecisive, and it's like, no, I need help. Like I need to like learn how to operate to become my best self, right? That just wanted to share that because I think it's connected.
Yeah, it's true. And so it's like, yeah, don't tell me that I'm indecisive. Ask me a series of questions. Like, help me walk through my own thoughts, like help me externally process this new idea that I just came up with, and allow me the space to be able to come to a decision myself. I don't need your judgment, I need your support.
Yes. And like not even having the language with that growing up was really hard. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I feel like I've been so hard on myself and I've had to let go. I'm like, can't operate like this anymore because I'm burning myself to the ground and I'm so burnt out at this point. That's why I left everything and started over because I could no longer operate like that.
Mm-hmm. Somebody came in a little late, so just FYI, what we're talking about today is just ADHD and being multi-passionate and all the things that come along with that. And we've gotten into a couple of sidebar conversations as well.
Awesome.
And then somebody wanted me to go a little bit into bilateral stimulation. So the short version of it is that the exercise in of itself is, I mean, just to do it quickly, because this is really not the topic of today, but just to do it quickly, and I may go into more of this tomorrow. Take an object, any object, doesn't matter what it is. I have timers all over my kitchen. Also, plug, have timers all over your house. Take something in your hand, put it in your right hand, extend your hand out, cross your body, put it in the other hand, and then just pass the object back and forth. This helps reduce anxiety. Some of the more complicated science behind it is that, all of your energy is going to one part of your brain when you're starting to feel anxious. Doing an exercise like this forces your brain to spread it out, the energy. And so that's the very quick version
I love that.
of
Thank you for
bilateral
sharing.
stimulation.
Found my crystal, so I was like, here, let's do
Yes.
that.
So, if you're starting to feel kind of hot and bothered, just like start doing this and you'll start to feel calmer.
I feel it.
Okay. Let me scroll down and see if there's any more other things before we. So I hope everybody is up to speed. Keep coming with the questions. I'm loving it.
I can't look at the questions because I get distracted. So I'm
It's
like,
okay.
I've just been
I
looking at your
can
face the
totally.
whole entire time.
Oh, that's good. Whereas like the recording is going to be me like.
I'm
You're
ready
doing
to
what you're
answer the
supposed.
questions, but I'm staring at you,
You're
Megan, because I might get
doing all the
distracted.
things. You're doing all the things that's going to look good on camera versus me. I'm like,
Girl, you
I'm
look
over this,
great.
looking
You
all over
look
here.
great. Don't be,
Um,
you look great to me. Thank you for having me again, by the way. I feel so
oh
comfortable
no.
having this conversation with you.
Oh, good, good, good. You know, that's my superpower is making people feel
I
comfortable.
feel comfortable with you, so thank you.
um, my sons have ADHD. I don't see them using it as a superpower. They exhibit in as a I cannot read. They exhibit it as a hindrance, unfocused, minimal effort, incomplete tasks, antisocial, no goals, committed to playing video games. I would argue that that is one way of seeing it, and then I'm wondering if because it's a challenges that you also may find to be difficult to deal with, are you missing something that is not there? Um, also. And you know, those are real challenges, but you know, are there other skills that you may not necessarily be noticing? Um, okay. I'm so there's so many comments. People are so like into this today and I'm so excited.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm like, maybe this is the right time of day to be having these conversations. Um, I have to remind myself that being multi-passionate multiple times a day to let go of the guilt that I'm allowed to rest.
Yes.
Absolutely. Do not wear yourself out. If you have a lot of if you have a lot of passions and start doing things like, and this is why I mentioned earlier, like you need to have a conversation about your capacity because you will burn yourself out just doing everything. Like you can't do everything.
Can't do it all.
You can't do it all, and you can't do it all at the same time. It doesn't mean that you can't do it all in life, like over your lifetime, but like, and I know that, and I follow the philosophy like tomorrow isn't promised, but that doesn't mean that you need to do everything today because tomorrow isn't promised. That's not what that means. But it is important to know that you can put a pin in that and be like, it's okay. Like, you know what, this is like, do you have an ideas book? Like maybe put all of your ideas in an ideas book and then revisit it every 3 to 6 months, and see if this is a more appropriate time to do that. I don't know. What do you do with your extra ideas?
I have so many notes in my phone. I have a plethora of notes in my phone. But I was actually still thinking about the question that it just crossed my mind. I didn't read it, but the question that you had just brought up, I think someone had mentioned their sons having ADHD and playing video games. I actually have a younger sister, and I feel like sometimes with ADHD, in terms of seeking dopamine, right? Finding healthy ways of dopamine, it's something that I just wanted to touch on that has helped me because even me, I struggle with doom scrolling, social media. And as someone with ADHD, next thing you know, you're already like way deep into it. And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like feeling lethargic at this point, right? But being able to feel, I also find that like being in community with others and spending time with others, going outside. And so that, and for example, if someone's just going to yell at me and be like, stop playing video games or whatever, I feel completely shut down. And I think that's part
Mm-hmm.
of like the emotional regulation part. Um, but if I'm feeling inspired and I'm like, oh, an art project today, then I'll do that and I'll go
Yeah.
outside. And so I think that is something that I just wanted to mention because even me being in my 20s and late 20s now, I find that I can even be stuck in this cycle of doom scrolling on social media and wanting to not think about anything, and it's a dopamine that is not always healthy when you're always on it, so just having that balance is so important.
Yeah. And I would also argue that there's different strategies and techniques that are helpful and and supportive in language that can be used to communicate with people that have ADHD, depending on the age
Yes.
of your kid, like of the kids versus adults. Like I specifically work with adults, And I know people that work with kids, and like, you know, my background is in education anyway, but you know, there's and because and our brain is developing at it's just a different place in our brain development too. So like working with kids, like we already like it's the brain hasn't even gotten close to being finished developing, and so the expectations, your expectations, your understanding of how you're communicating, like all just needs to be different than when you're thinking about when you're talking with an adult. And so that's just the reality. So I feel like there has to be a shift in perspective too. I think when just working with kids in general that have ADHD, because there's a huge difference with
There is a
kids and
huge
adults.
difference. I mean, I wish I had someone that helped me when I was younger, and that's why I'm so passionate about it now because
Hmm.
I didn't have those resources. And
Yeah,
also culturally, it's stigmatized as well, right?
yeah. And if you're looking for resources or to access coaches that specifically work with youth, then just send me a DM because I can send you some recommendations. Um, also, and then somebody said, can you speak again about the downside of being multi-passionate and how to effectively communicate with others about the benefits of it? Um, what have been some of the downsides of being multi-passionate for you?
For me personally, I will say that I've just felt like it can be debilitating and just overwhelming, right? To not know what direction to move in. But in terms of moving forward, and I also think to myself, working not against myself, but working with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I mean by that is thinking about what interests me, what I'm passionate about, taking it one day at a time, but also going currently going towards what is the loudest. That has been something that a friend said to me recently that has really helped me. And so I have all these different projects that I've been working on, but going towards what is the loudest for me, of course, that is reasonable and within my means. And so I also think it's kind of interesting too, because as someone who does have ADHD, I've been in event planning roles. I am great at planning events. I'm so organized when it comes to like being in the traditional 9 to 5 and at a desk. Like I can get the job done. But personally, I think I don't know if you feel this way, Megan, but I feel like my personal life has taken more of a hit than it is like my professional external life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so being really organized is also super helpful. It's kind of
Yeah.
ironic to me because as someone who struggles with it already and like time blindness and all that, being late to things. I don't want to be late, but I physically have to be organized. I have to proactively be like, okay, well, I have to be at this event at 8. Okay, well, set a timer because I have to put in like diddle daddling time. And then there's this like in my head, I'm like, oh, ADHD glitched before I leave the house. I'm always losing my keys, forgetting something. So literally timing yourself for all of that. And it has to be like a good 5 hours or something before because you never know what could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's why I have literally have these timers are all over my house. And you know one of
And
the other
therapy as
strategies,
well.
yes, and Dr. Shauna, we talked about therapy a couple weeks ago, and yeah, one of the other strategies that I use too is it's all connected to being aware, right? So like I know the things that trip me up, and some of those things are like I will forget things, and so what do? I paint my doors with whiteboard paint and put reminders on my doors. So like when I think about them, it's like I need to make sure before I leave the house, I need to have these 10 things, and so I'm doing drive-bys throughout the house and just writing all the things that I need to remember before I leave the house. Um, but one of the other things that you just said is I would say that being a downside of being multi-passionate is it does impact relationships, and I think you had briefly mentioned that, but it does impact relationships. And so like when you think about your social circle, right? Usually like your social circle, like there's some commonalities between like why you guys are connected. But if you're multi-passionate and if you choose to pivot to something else, then that may shift your social circle, right? And so now you're talking about developing new relationships, potentially losing old relationships, and um, or just the energy that it takes to develop new relationships. So sometimes, like if you are multi-passionate, you're going in a completely different direction. Now you have to build a whole new network that you didn't have access to before, right? And so then what happens to your old network? Do you still stay connected to them? Do you not stay connected to them? And so it can really impact your relationships that you have with people, I would argue.
What do you do to help that, Megan? What are some things that help with the the impact that it has on your relationships.
I mean, I would ask yourself, how are those relationships serving you? Are they relationships, like, do you just have a connection with somebody because it's connected to some type of work that you're doing? Or is it a true, like, connection and friendship? And does that relationship still add value to your life? And if it doesn't, then it's okay to let go. And if it does, then you do what you need to do in order to maintain it. But I don't think you should necessarily just have people in your life just to be having people in your life. And so, I mean, and sometimes that goes to family too. And that's, nobody wants to talk about that, but sometimes you gotta let some family members go.
You gotta let go in general, period. Just let go.
Yeah, and true Elsa style.
Yes.
And I will not sing on this live because you don't want to hear that. I'm glad that, I mean, when I'm in a choir with about another 50 other people, so then you can't hear me. You can't hear me individual. Well. You can't. And okay, so there's like a whole bunch of conversation happening right here about. I'm sorry, I can't fully follow the entire conversation if I'm being honest. And I'm trying. But
we have 2 minutes left, I think.
Yes, we have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure that we get it to everything. But yes, there are some resources available around youth and ADHD, and some audiobooks and podcasts are available as well. And but if you need some additional resources, then just go ahead and send me a DM or visit my website. And thank you for whoever posted my website in the chat as well.
Thank you.
How do you present to employers on interviews that you are multi-passionate? I feel like some employers feel like it indicates that you're all over the place and not task-oriented. I'm so glad that you asked that question, and I'm going to not answer it intentionally because next week we have a whole conversation with somebody about resume writing. And so next Tuesday, I want to say the 29th, we have somebody coming in here talking about resume writing and ADHD, and so that is going to come up in the conversation. And also, we talked a little bit about it a week or two ago when we were talking about interviewing with ADHD. So I'm going to let you listen to the replay for that one, and then also join the conversation on next week on Tuesday when we start talking about resumes. And so this will definitely come up because that's just the reality, right? Like, you have multiple different jobs that don't seem connected, but they feel connected to you. And how do you present that on paper? And how do you talk about that when you are interviewing for a job? So come back next Tuesday and you will hear all about that. So I'm pausing on that comment. Yes, we do write a statement. An artist is, scratch the word artist. I'm glad that you can't wait. So yes, nutritionist is coming up. I think this is a good time to end. How do you feel?
I think it's great. I think it's been great to have this conversation with you, Megan, and I'm glad that everyone joined today. And thanks everyone for asking questions. And I hope to see you all soon again. Yeah, this is great. And so again, so there was somebody that was going to be coming tomorrow, but she's actually going to be coming at the end of the month. So tomorrow is going to be a big question mark, but I will be on live, and what we're going to be talking about to be determined. But just come on because it's going to be something interesting. And on Friday we have a nutritionist. Next week we have a financial advisor coming in to talk about money and ADHD. We have, again, the person talking about resume writing. We will also have somebody doing some exercises to regulate your emotions. And I want to say there's one other topic, but keep a lookout on my page because those topics will be announced there soon. And so then again, Thursday, if you go to my bio, if you identify as a woman with ADHD and you want to access some group coaching, there is still a reduced fee for the month of October for $20 per session. So that link to be able to sign up for that is in my bio. It's Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to join some group coaching, it's a bunch of us having a conversation about all things ADHD and some strategies and techniques, and then I drop a couple of gems in there as well.
And I do have a group coaching membership coming out as well. So please stay tuned for that. And so there'll be a monthly membership fee, and you'll have access to group coaching. You'll have access to some education. You'll have access to some different courses that will help you really excel and thrive at work and in life.
Can't wait.
Yes, but thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And thank you, Kimaleen. You have a beautiful spirit, and I appreciate sharing this space with you. I appreciate sharing the space with you, and I hope that you all have a really good night. I am going to celebrate my wedding anniversary, so I gotta go.
Congratulations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
I will see y'all later. All right. Bye.